data based on historical data as well as future trends. We then submit our projected enrollment to each of the school sites' principals. The principals share that with their staff, and then they provide us with information about what they project for next year, things we may not be aware of in the budget office, such as an apartment complex being built in their area with a lot of young students that we may not know about. Different things they know going on in the community. That then comes back to the budget office, and we set up meetings with all of the associate superintendents, the chief human resource officer, Ramon Ray, and a couple of their personnel in HR too. Then we all sit down together, or now we do it remotely via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and we discuss the patterns and whether they agree or disagree and things that are going on. This year we did also look at, because our enrollment is so volatile or fluid, I guess I should say, this year with the pandemic, we did also look at what was going on in December 2nd. We pulled another enrollment just to see how our figures were, because we generally look at the first, the count day when we provide the schools with their staffing. It's called our 10th day count. This year it was called the 6th day count. On this graph right here, I'm showing the live birth rate history, and if you look back at 2016, you can see we have decreased enrollment, decreased birth rates in Chatham County in 2016 as compared to 2015. 2016 is used because that will be the 5-year mark for kindergarten students entering our school district for next fiscal year in 22. And as you can see, I've graphed it through 2019. We're on a decline with birth rates until through 18. So for the next couple of years, we're showing declining birth rates coming into our kindergarten classes. On this graph, this shows the 5-year regular enrollment summary for grades 1 through 5. We are projecting a loss next year based on our 6-day count. The 6-day count was done on September 14th, 2020 this year. We waited because of the pandemic. It was actually, we called it a 6-day count because it was like the 6-day counting Labor Day on. We were trying to give everybody a chance to find students, get students situated with remote virtual learning, and making sure we were reaching all the students. So we took our 6-day count on September 14th, 2020, and we had gone down from our projected enrollment for grades 1 through 5 to 16,460 students. We're projecting another loss next year of about 357 students for this grade for fiscal year 20 to 16,103 students. And those numbers do not include pre-K and self-contained special ed students. On this next graph, I'm graphing the grades 6 through 8 students. That is an area that we have been on a trend growing. As you can see, our actuals this year were 8,694. We are projecting a gain of 101 students for next fiscal year to 88,795. On this is our high school students, grades 9 through 12 on this graph, and it has been the last couple of years on an upward trajectory, and we are projecting it to increase by about 50 students for next fiscal year, school year. All of these have not contained the pre-K or self-contained special ed students. On this graph, I'm showing the total enrollment, and this does include the pre-K and self-contained special ed students. This year's 6-day count on September 14th, there was 36,434 students, and we are projecting a loss of 101 students total for next year of 36,336 students. And we are going to relook at these numbers again in the spring before we adopt the budget, just to see how our projected enrollment is following as the year goes on. This graph shows the private school enrollment trend. This was taken during the FTE count, which was on October 6, 2020 this year. As you can see, there is, private schools were on a downward trend until this year, and they've increased a few students, about 133 students this year as opposed to last year, back in October, at the beginning of October 2020. We always in our budget, we try to project out into the future, and we are projecting a slow decline in enrollment for our school district due to the birth rate decline in Chatham County and nationwide. We're projecting a slow decline in enrollment in future years, projected out to fiscal year 24. This is just a snapshot of our budget calendar for this year. And the one area that I did want to point out on this slide is we'll do a budget workshop in May 2021 when we present the preliminary budget. And on this page, I just wanted to point out our two goals this year for the budget office is to bring a preliminary budget to the board at the beginning of May 2021 and adopt the budget by June 23rd, 2021, the adopted budget. Has anybody got any questions or discussion at this time?
One, Mr. Johnson, and Dr. Hopkins Brown, and then Ms. Corbett.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your report. I really do, as always, appreciate these numbers. You mentioned that y'all did another count in December. Do we know what those numbers are?
Yes, I have. Would you like me to share? I mean, I have a whole spreadsheet I could share. We did it on December 2nd. What we did is kind of like what we do on our 6-day count. I wanted to see, and our numbers had decreased again by.
Yeah, what was that total number?
The total. Our total count went down from December 2nd, 2020 to 34,031 students. We decreased, we lost 100 and, excuse me, you can't hear me, I'm sorry. On our December 2nd, 2020 count, we had 34,031 students. We lost 193 students from the previous count.
Well, the 6-day count had it at 36,400. Does that 34,000 include the pre-K and contain special ed? Because that would be more than 100.
Right. Our account with pre-K and special ed, excuse me, for December 2nd, 2020 was 36,089 students.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hoskins Brown and Ms. Corbett.
Thank you for your report. I'm looking at the numbers in terms of the difference between actual and projected. And I see that the difference in the actual is 626 students and 633 have gone to private school. We've gotten a lot of comments that there's this large egress of families from the district to private schools, but that's only looking like 1.8%.
Yeah, back in October, when we do a count of private schools, it wasn't as much. I think we have lost some students since then that may have gone to the private schools. I think there are just some students that that are just not coming, like that has been in the media about the kindergarten students, that they're not required to attend kindergarten. So, but yeah, it doesn't look that, from the October count, it doesn't look like the private schools have gained that many students. Now, they probably have gone up higher in numbers since that time, I would imagine. We don't have any data on that, though.
Right.
Because they don't do a count after that. It was done on October 6, 2020, so that was kind of at the beginning of the school year.
Right, but even if that doubled, it still would be only slightly over 3.5%.
That's true. I mean, not knowing any of this, but I mean, I believe some students have registered to other out-of-county in cases where they could get away with doing that, registering through other households in other counties. That's a possibility. We've lost some to homeschooling, possibly.
Okay.
We've lost some to, a lot of kindergarten students didn't come in. They're not required to attend kindergarten, so we've lost quite a number of kindergarten students.
Okay. I'm just looking to look at that concern with the correct level of magnitude that is presented. It's being presented at a huge level of magnitude, and I think it won't be until we get our data later on that we see what that really means. But I didn't have a lot of concern about it prior to now, and the data and even though I know it's speculation about what you're going to see in the future about movement to other counties and homeschool, it doesn't seem like it is that it's a major drop. So
No, compared to other places, I looked around nationwide, we really did not go down percentage-wise that much. It was very minimal, really. I mean, compared to other places that I was getting data from, I couldn't believe some people had lost way higher percentage than we have of students, because it really isn't that high when you look at the total. It's
right. Thank
even
you
in a
very
worst
much.
case, we're looking at maybe 1,000 students, which is percentage-wise, what, about 4 to 5%? I'd have to put it in there. It's not even, maybe not even that high.
It'd be less
Yeah,
than 5%.
it's not even that. It's maybe,
yeah.
what, 2% to 2.5% or so?
As we move on, I've got Ms. Grabowski and then other comments from board members. I would ask both our speaker at the podium and board members, if you're comfortable when you are speaking, if you would take your mask down just for speaking. You do not have to, but I was reminded by Ms. Davis-Brown that trying to write minutes, it is sometimes it's so very muffled. And so if you do not feel comfortable, don't do it. If you do, it would help, especially up there. You've got a thing in front of you, but I'm a big mask wearer, but we're having trouble sometimes getting the minutes transferred. Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Just to piggyback and clarify, you said we will get updated numbers as part of the budget process, correct?
Yes, I'm going to run the numbers in the spring.
Okay.
I would like to wait till we kind of come back to in-person, because I think we will gain a lot of students at that time, and want to look at that. I've actually been extremely conservative in my decrease amount, even though it's showing going down. I haven't dropped it a whole lot at this point. That's why I definitely want to look at it again in the spring and see if we get I'm anticipating that we will get students back when we're in-person learning for next year.
Okay.
And I'm hoping, we're all hoping that we can go back in person this year, at
Okay.
least on a hybrid model.
Thank you for clarifying. And then my other question was, do we coordinate with the Metropolitan Planning Commission, City of Savannah, Chatham County, other jurisdictions on our population projections, especially to look at in-migration into the county?
No, the only thing I use is what I've listed on here, which is the data that is shown for the birth rates, which is, I'm trying to see on my thing where I've listed, I don't want to call out the wrong name.
I can't hear her.
I think, anecdotally, I think we've heard a lot about people moving to our region, especially, leaving other areas that are more congested or whatever. And I think, based on historic projections and what we've seen in the growth of Chatham County and of this region, it might be helpful to at least coordinate with, especially with the Metropolitan Planning Commission. They're in the process right now of updating the comprehensive plan, and so this is something that they're looking at as well. But it may help give us a clearer picture of what we can anticipate, especially when we're looking out several years.
That's a great suggestion, and that wouldn't be a bad idea. I can start maybe even checking with Brian in Effingham and seeing if they're getting many of our students, because I have checked with them on other things in the past, so that's a great suggestion.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do believe that there are other cabinet members who work with Metropolitan Planning Commission. So while Mrs. Cooley may not directly, there
Yeah.
are Mrs. Miller-Kegler and Mr. Jackson. So, thank you.
Mr. Johnson, and then Dr. Howard Hall.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a couple of actually follow-up questions. I do want to say that I know we do talk about the building side. I know Ms. Miller-Kegler does work with the Planning Commission to find out how many building permits have been for development and stuff. So that kind of does go into, especially when we deal with East Bluff. My follow-up question is, you said that you believe that we are going to go back and you want to look at the numbers when we go back in person. What happens if we don't go back in person this semester?
We're still going to pull, just like I did on December 2nd, I'm going to pull the numbers. I'm going to try to look at them right around the next FTE in March. And then maybe even if we have an opportunity at a later date, even past that, I just would like to keep looking at them because right now we are in the stages of each time I look at them, they go down.
Okay. And my other follow-up question is, have we reached out to the private schools? Because I've actually spoken to some private school administrators, and they were saying back right after our last board meeting in December that they already have waiting lists for next school year. And that's coming from multiple administrators in different private schools, saying that they're looking at a admissions boom come next school year. So I think it might be good for us as a district to kind of say, what is your enrollment, your full capacity? Do you have a wait list for what grades? We're trying to figure things out as well.
That's a great suggestion, and I can certainly do that because I have reached out at times for other areas to the private schools. So I can because I know most private schools do make you turn in a deposit by the end of January. So they're probably going to have a pretty good feel of how many students they're going to have. And I believe you usually have to sign a contract with the private school where you're out a lot of money even if you don't attend the first day of school, usually in the springtime. So they're going to have a really good feel. They'll have most of the kids going have to sign contracts, I know. So they're going to have a pretty good feel at the end of January because I know most of the private schools, it's around the January 31st that you have to turn in if you're going the following year and give a non-refundable deposit. And then later in spring, I know you have to sign contracts stating that you will pay out this amount of money whether you attend the first day of class or not to them, so that they're going to have a pretty good feel of how many students, especially when those contracts are signed by the private schools. So I will definitely reach out to them and see what I know a lot of them were kind of in the same situation we were. They took on some kids, some of them did, but some of them were not able to take in more because they are trying to distance it the same way we are. So, but next year it is possible. I'm sure people are this time having to make their mind up this month of what they're going to do for next year. A lot of parents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, have you noticed a significant increase with parents who are homeschooling? And I would also love to see the data for the number of first graders for next year, since many of the kindergartners are possibly not enrolled right now, but may enroll for first grade.
I haven't looked. I'm going to reach out to the state. We offered the virtual, so we're hoping that students don't go in homeschool, that they'll use our virtual school if they don't want to come in person. But I will reach out to the state and see if they can give me how many Chatham County students are homeschooling through the state, because they do have the state, and I'll ask and see if they would share that information.
A concern that I have, I guess I'm not particularly concerned about private schools. Our job, to me, is to provide a very, very viable option for parents to have for public school, and that we do a great job with what we're doing so that they choose to come to us. It is for those parents who have financial means, it is, I think, understandable that during the last 15 months or during the last almost year that they have chosen because of dissatisfaction or whatever reason to move to something else. I say all that to say that my concern is way more things that we have done a great job over the last 12 years or so of making an option that parents all across our spectrum wanted to be a part of. It is important that we continue to do that. Right now, recovery back to whatever parents want, maybe virtual, it may be face-to-face, whatever it is important to me for us to do as good a job with that as we can do. I'm also very, very concerned that we have a proactive program to let parents of kindergartners know how important it is that they be with us from the word go. I can understand holding your kid out this year because of the pandemic, et cetera. But for the last 15 years, we have put a lot of stock in the fact that our kindergartners could read. Because if they could read, by grade 3, they were ahead of the game. And now we're talking about kindergartners that are probably not going to be able to read when they get to us, or within a short time after that. So along with our recovery, to me, a sales program, and I know, Ms. Cooley, it's not your job there, it's really the district I'm talking about, but I think it becomes very critical for us to show the importance of a kindergartner coming as quickly as a parent feels comfortable with that, so that we can help them learn to read, because we know that impacts 10 years, 9 years, 12 years from now. That's just my own little soapbox. So, any other comments? Ms. Hall?
This is back to your request that people take their masks off to speak. I noticed you didn't need to take yours off then, and I could hear you very well. So for safety reasons, I prefer for people to just project your voice, and that way we can keep our masks on.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ms. Cooley. Mr. Jackson, your turn.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to start with the financial statements for the period ending November 30th, 2020. As you all have seen, the reports look a little different. There are some headings on some pages, but we've tried to keep the information of how it was reported the same. We're so elated that we were able to actually push the button on our new financial system. In doing so, it gave us the opportunity to update some account lines and chart of accounts from our local accounts to make them match what the state uses. So that's what the first page of the report gives you. The second page, in the past reports, we were able to give you the fund descriptions on the top of each page. We're actually working with the provider to help us revise the reports to get those descriptions to the top of each page. But for this particular report, we listed all of the new funds and the descriptions, so you would have them just in case you had any questions. But we're hoping to, over the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to continue to make improvements to the report and continue to make adjustments to some of the financial accounts that we moved around. So there are going to be some adjustments over the next 3 or 4 months to our information that's in units. For all of the statements and all of the funds, 41.67% of the fiscal year and 30% of the school year has elapsed. In the general fund, which is before you now, Local property taxes are currently at 57.7% of the budget, which is higher than FY20 of 54% and higher than FY 2019 of 54% also. I think we mentioned last November and December that the property tax collections were coming in pretty good for the calendar year of 2020. Overall, total general fund revenues are 46% of the current modified budget, which is just a little bit lower than FY 2020 of 49%. And the general fund, the actual teacher expenditures are 29% of the budget, which is within the normal range. However, the actual paraprofessional expenditures are 25% of the budget, which is lower than expected of 30%. Substitute expenditures are also impacted by COVID-19 remote learning. In total, general fund expenditures are 31% of the budget, which is lower than last year. As we get into the other funds, so far we don't have any concerns as far as revenues or expenditures in the other grants or in capital projects. One thing I do want to point out as I go to the contingency page. Just wanted to make sure this wasn't providing any confusion. There are actually three pots of money that's on this particular document. The first top part is the normal $500,000 contingency that we would normally have every year for board contingency. In the middle section is a $300,000 contingency budget amount. That is actually a budget that board requested about 3 years ago as kind of an emergency fund when we started during the hurricane season, and the board decided to put some money aside just for emergency repairs and so forth. Internally, we consider it contingency, so we place it on this report so the board will be able to keep track of it. The bottom portion actually is something that we may take off. It's not really contingency, but it's money that we set aside to pay for some legal settlements that the board is aware of. So I just wanted to explain this particular page, but again, we'll probably take the bottom portion off. Yes, there's a question.
Dr. Buck, that's page 29 of our packet.
I got it. Yes,
okay.
I'm
I
sorry.
asked a question about it. Is there some way that can just identify in the item description that those are 3 subsections of
Correct.
the same contingency, or can you make one box gray or something,
Yes.
use some other way
Exactly.
to indicate that? 'Cause
Exactly, and I did make that note of my response. We will identify the 3 of them so you would know exactly what they were for, what they're for. And again, well, the 2 of them, because we would take the last line off for the settlement expenditures. But we will identify the regular contingency and the emergency contingency account. We will identify those 2. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, due to COVID-19, I see that in the Title I budget, it's a negative percentage of funds that's been expended. So are you all looking at possibly doing some budget transfers or reallocating those funds because they're not really traveling as much as they normally would?
You're correct. As I mentioned earlier, we're still making some corrections in the information that was converted to munis. So some of it could be part of the corrections, but the Title I office is also looking at their particular grant budget to see if they need to go ahead and make adjustments. Normally with Title I and most other programs, we would do professional development and travel in the spring. Right now, we're still not sure if that will occur, but we will monitor it closely, and we will get with the office to see if they need to make adjustments before that time.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir. And the next item is one that I requested that we add We presented this information, gave this information to the board, I believe in December as superintendent's notes. So basically what we did was kind of convert that superintendent's note to a PowerPoint presentation so we can make the information available to the public. This is regarding the CARES Act grant. Both grants that we received in 2020, the purpose of the grant, again, was to support education, local education districts during the pandemic. The purpose and the categories that the state approved that we could spend the money on, they are listed below for at-risk populations, distance and remote learning, school meals, facility equipment, and so on. The next page, slide 3, just gives you a timeline of the process. It took us a little while, but as I mentioned last month, we were almost there. Then at the federal level, there was some debate about how do we fund private schools. So all of the districts in Georgia had to kind of drop back, punt, and start over again. So we were finally able to get everything approved by the state in December. And the budget is approved, the account lines are out there, so we're actually actively spending out of those accounts now. The budget, we received budget requests, and we approached this as pretty much as a team, which each division, looking at their needs and what was necessary to operate as a district. Human resource took the responsibility of purchasing the non-contact thermometers and temperature kiosks. I believe some of you have seen some of the kiosks if you've gone to a school, you've seen them at the school. I think we have one at the door here. You probably have seen over the last couple of months. Data and information concentrated on providing technology resources to students and staff. That was at $3.6 million. Academic affairs took the approach of working on equipment for the classrooms and also providing software and online solutions for students and teachers. That totaled $1.3 million. Operations took the responsibility of providing support for the custodial staff and all of the sanitation and cleaning equipment that we have out into the schools. And even as of this week, I know the operations maintenance staff has been allocating resources. Principals have been going over to maintenance, picking up additional supplies and equipment from that department. School nutrition, there are some items that would not normally be covered by school nutrition. So there were some additional items that they had to pick up to support their activities while we were delivering meals via buses. That was $140,000. And also we provided a budget for the transportation staff to sanitize buses and also for their employees to include sanitizers, the sprayers that they go on the bus and sanitize the buses, and other equipment. Other parts of the budget included indirect costs that normally that would come with a federal grant. There's a portion of $465,000 of indirect costs. There's a small portion, the $8,678. That's a portion that the federal grant allows us to charge as part of the grant to support private schools. So it's almost like another indirect cost, just totally related to private schools. The administrative fee also is related to private schools. We have a private school budget of $693,000 for the private schools that actually participated in the CARES Act grant. They all had to submit information, actually a couple of times, to the Title I office to participate in the program. And the allocation to charter schools, to the 5 charter schools, total $417,000. Chart here just gives you an overall total of the entire $10.9 million that the district received as we call it now, the first round of the CARES Act grant. We received an additional set-aside budget. As I mentioned earlier, there was some debate about how we fund the private schools, and initially what the state proposed was to give districts additional money to offset what we initially was going to give private schools. Right. So they gave us an additional $900,000 to offset that amount we were going to give the private schools. We're just fortunate it happened before the federal government looked at, before they started their debate on whether or not we fund private schools on their total enrollment or we fund them on their free and reduced lunch numbers. So the additional set-aside money, most of the money that the district, all of the money that the district is using, we're using it for our Ready platform, and most of you are familiar with that. Again, we have the indirect cost of $32,000. The allocations, unfortunately, each part of the CARES Act budget, we have to give funds to private schools out of that allotment. So they got another $59,000 that was divided among the schools. If I'm not mistaken, there were 17 private schools that participated, and other charter schools, they received an additional $34,000. And again, this is a snapshot of the entire $906,000 of the additional set-aside money that the district received. The good news is, as most of you are aware, last December, Congress passed an additional allotment for the CARES Act and the ESSER, as we refer to it. Of that amount, of the $54.3 billion that was approved, the district, Chatham County, we found out that we were awarded $44 million out of that pie. Of that $44 million, once we make an allocation to the private schools, again to the charter schools, and take out the indirect costs, we have about $37 million that we will start planning to budget for this school year. This grant also ends June 30th of 2022. We are really hoping that the federal government extend that another year, but currently it's planned to end at the same time as the first allotment. Any questions?
Ms. Hall, please.
I believe I read that this CARES Act will have less restrictive accommodations for us. Do you know about that? Is that so, that we'll be able to appropriate monies for a wider range of things than the first CARES Act? Is that so?
Honestly, I have not seen any details yet. We actually have a webinar with the state. The state has a webinar in the morning that will give us details on what we can use the money for. Initially, we were told that it would be the same criteria as the first allotment, but we do have a webinar in the morning to get details on that.
Okay, so I guess next board meeting you'd be able
Yes,
to
ma'am.
fill in
Yes,
on.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Or if not prior, through superintendent's notes.
Other comments from board members? Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
All right, you're all welcome.
I think for board members themselves, it's important for us to sort of spread the word on this, because I continue to hear, oh, you've gotten all these millions of dollars and you're not doing anything with them, and you're hoarding it, and you're doing this and you're doing that. And so I think using the sheet we just got is very clear, and it also shows that indeed we've done what we needed to do to share it with other educational endeavors here in the community. So, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Buck, to that end, do you have any suggestions of what we might do so that we can get this kind of material out more broadly to the public? I mean, over and over and over again, I find out that there's huge swaths of our constituents who just don't know what we're doing. And I can't figure out how, we don't have a big PR budget, but how can we get that out? I know we use our website 100%.
I think we just have to continue always to, highlight things on our website. I'm always amazed at how much information is on our website. If somebody really wants to do a little search, they can find it. But I also know that we're overwhelmed with material today in today's world, and so you read something quickly, and that's, you Google it, read 2 sentences, and you're expert. And so it's really difficult, but I agree with you. I don't have an answer, but I think it's very important that we continue to sell our story and tell our stories.
Maybe that sheet that Mr. Jackson just showed, I mean, if WTOC and WJCL and all got that sheet and just showed it for a minute, that might reach more people than the ones who we depend on.
I am sure Ms. Jennings can work to make that happen. It's interesting as a sort of a side note, but as we were talking this morning about enrollment, one of our TV channels last night did basically the same presentation that we saw this morning on enrollment decreases and increases and all that, and what that meant to us in terms of money, and I thought she actually did a very good job of telling it like it was. So we just we continue to have to work, and I think the board members themselves are very valuable stewards and tellers of information, because some people still do believe us. Occasionally. My wife tells me she believes me every now and then. So. Any other comment? Any other business to come before us in this informal session? Hearing none, could I have a motion for us to move into executive session? Dr. Hoskins-Brown moves that. Mr. Johnson seconds. I would ask board members after we vote if you'll stay close, and let's start the executive session as quickly as we can clear the room, so that we can go and get that done, and then we'll move forward. But any comments, questions? All in favor of moving us into executive session, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let the record show the vote was 8-0-0. Ms. Hines is unable to be here today due to a death in her family. We're into executive session in just a few moments. Get the room cleared, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.